When it comes to studying Australian colonial history, scholars have long valued diaries written by early settlers as a primary source of information. The only drawback can be that the writing is often quite dry and lacking in colour. Not so with an extraordinary book that's been discovered after more than 170 years. The diary, written by a Scotsman making his way to South Australia in 1838, tells lurid tales about the shenanigans that went on board the ship the Planter. Mike Sexton reports.
In the State Library of South Australia, there is a book that can only be handled by staff wearing white gloves. It's a migrant's diary from 1838. But this is no ordinary account of a voyage from the old world to the new. Between its fragile covers lie scandalous details of the state's colonial past.
It is like an airport novel. I mean, there's mutiny, there's affairs, menage a trois, there's all sorts of plotting and scheming, brothers fighting against each other for land and property. And I would say the book in some ways can be summed up as a series of character assassinations.
The author was a 21-year-old Scottish clerk named James Bell, who left London on board a ship called the Planter as it brought migrants to the colony of South Australia, which was just 2 years old.
He is someone, I think, who is attracted by this experimental colony, in particular, I suspect, the religious freedom, for one thing. So he's a Presbyterian, so he's a member of a non-state, non-Anglican church group in Britain.
South Australia was the only colony populated entirely by free settlers, and there's always been a certain satisfaction among its residents knowing there's no convict stain on their history. But the James Bell diary seems to shatter any delusions that everyone who made their way out answered to a high moral code, as he details affairs, drunkenness, deaths and a mutiny.
The people that he admires and respects, he passes over in a few sentences and said, "Oh, you're a very admirable person." And the people whose guts he couldn't stand get pages and pages of detailed descriptions.
For descendants of those on board the Planter, such as Marjorie Brown, the diary has added some colour to the family history. Her family tree grew from a London carpenter, Henry Durow, who came to South Australia with his wife and 7 children.
He called him a blackguard, and of course, you know, we don't really want to think of our ancestors as being blackguards. We like to think them as nice, sweet people, but I think he was a bit cruel with all the people on the ship, really. He was quite class conscious.
Henry Durow's wife Lucy died on board the Planter and was buried in Cape Town.
When they got to South Africa, strangely enough, one of the children was adopted out to a wealthy family, and no one could ever sort of quite work this out. But they did keep in touch with this girl who was adopted out. The wealthy family actually let her keep her name, which we thought was very nice.
Librarian Anthony Laub has researched those mentioned in the diary. He found stories of those who'd come with money and lost it, while others had the reverse fortune.
There's a young 18-year-old in Steerage named Alexander Hay who gets no mention in the diary, but who came out here. He was a weaver from Dunfermline in Scotland, came out to South Australia, and through Kenny investment, largely, and through having a shop in Rundle Street and various other things, became hugely wealthy.
Few people would have heard of Alexander Hay, but most Australians would know his great-great-grandson, former Foreign Minister Alexander Downer. While the diary contains intimate details of other people, there are only tantalising details about the author and the intended recipient of the diary, a mysterious woman referred to as CP.
It was written for one person, the woman he was in love with back in England, and obviously hoped to get together with, and obviously had a great deal of trust, a very close relationship. And he quite explicit instructions that it was for her eyes only, not to be seen by anyone else at all, and which meant he was incredibly frank and honest.
But any dreams James Bell may have had about being reunited with CP didn't eventuate. Within 2 years of arriving in Adelaide, he died of brain fever. The only reference to him is in a death register. But the diary somehow made its way back to England and for more than a century and a half it remained unseen until it turned up in a second-hand stall at a London street market.
Not a big grand antiquarian bookshop or anything. It was on a barrow stall in a street market, and someone was browsing and recognised the significance of it and took it to Sotheby's.
Marjorie Brown financially kick-started a drive that ended with the State Library buying the book for $22,000.
You just can't put a price on it. You can't put a price on something that was written so many years ago, laid somewhere or other, passed around through some family for 170 years, and then it turns up.
For some pioneers, such as Alexander Hay, their legacy's easy to find. But in Adelaide's colonial cemetery, there is no known grave for James Bell. But 174 years after he wrote his diary for one person's eyes only, it's now been picked up by a major publisher, meaning readers no longer need to wear white gloves to enjoy the ups and downs of his momentous voyage to Australia.
I think this is what, to me, is important, that the diary is back home where it belongs.
Sounds like a great read. Mike Sexton reporting there.